Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Chris Weidenbar, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Wing Commander Andrew Figtree. We are honoured to acknowledge Mr Dave Jeffries, representing the Naval Association of Australia, ACT branch, and we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Queensland and RSL Victoria who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors and by students on behalf of the following schools from New South Wales: Mater Dei Catholic College, Wagga Wagga, and Denman Public School. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Students, you may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depth of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to able seaman Philip William Steed. Philip Steed was born on the 21st of September 1922 in the Sydney suburb of Leichhardt, one of several children of Lillian and Sydney Steed. Philip's father had served in the infantry on the Western Front during the Great War, and after the outbreak of the Second World War, the 17-year-old enlisted in the Royal Australian Navy in May 1940. His first posting was to HMAS Cerberus, the Navy's training establishment some 70 kilometres south of Melbourne on Western Port Bay. He remained at Cerberus for just over 7 months before being posted to Sydney, now with a rating of ordinary seaman, on the 12th of February 1941. A modified Leander-class light cruiser, Sydney was armed with 8 6-inch guns and was the pride of the Royal Australian Navy. Built in England, the cruiser was commissioned into the Navy in 1935. Its crew had a mixture of ages and levels of all experience. Following the outbreak of the war, Sydney was one of several Australian warships sent to the Mediterranean, where it had demonstrated its fighting prowess, sinking the Italian cruiser Bartolomeo Colleoni in the Battle of Cape Spada on the 19th of July 1940. In February 1941, Sydney returned home to Australia, where it received a hero's welcome. For much of the year, the cruiser was engaged in escort duties that took the cruiser to the Netherlands East Indies, Singapore, Noumea, Auckland, and Suva before returning to Western Australian waters. In early July, Steed was promoted to able seaman. On the 19th of November 1941, Sydney was steaming back to Fremantle, having escorted a troop ship part of the way to Singapore. At about 4 p.m, the cruiser spotted a suspicious merchant ship and decided to investigate. By 5:30 p.m, Sydney was almost drawn alongside the vessel when it suddenly revealed its true identity as a German raider. Hoisting its German naval ensign, Cormoran fired its guns and torpedoes. Its first salvo slammed into Sydney's bridge. The Australian cruiser returned fire, but the raider's second and third salvos again hit Sydney's bridge and amidships. Its 3 main turrets were soon out of action, but a fourth kept up fast and accurate fire that hit the Cormoran's funnel and engine room. Sydney, in turn, was hit by a torpedo between turrets. Mortally damaged and ablaze, Sydney turned away from the raider, continuing to fight using its secondary armament and torpedoes. Cormoran was also burning. At 6:25 p.m, its captain gave the order to abandon ship. As the German sailors evacuated their stricken vessel, they watched the Australian cruiser, now only a distant glow on the dark horizon, disappear into the night. By midnight, Sydney was gone, lost with all 645 hands, including Steed. He was 19 years old. Philip Steed is commemorated on the Plymouth Naval Memorial in Britain. His name is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember able seaman Philip William Steed, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They have no grave but the cruel sea, no flowers lay at their head. A rusting hulk is their tombstone, a fast on the ocean bed. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. Leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening.